There is a quiet question that almost everyone feels at some point in their life, but very few dare to ask out loud. Why this life? Why this body, this family, this mind, these struggles? Why do some people seem to wake up early, aware, searching, restless, while others move through life untouched by these questions? Most people are told it's random. Genetics, luck, circumstance, but ancient philosophies whispered something far more unsettling, that life is not an accident, that consciousness does not begin at birth, and that who you are now is the continuation of a much longer journey. Long before you learned your name, before memory, before language, there was awareness, not a personality, not an ego, awareness itself, unbroken, expansive, observing without boundaries. In that state, there was no time the way we experience it now, no past or future, only being. And yet, even in that completeness, something stirred. Not dissatisfaction, not lack, but an urge to experience. Because knowing something in theory is not the same as living it. A soul may understand love and unity, but cannot understand sacrifice without separation. It may understand wisdom, but cannot understand courage without fear. So consciousness did something radical. It chose limitation. It chose to forget. Not as punishment, but as permission. Permission to learn through contrast. This is where the ancient idea of cyclical existence emerges. Not as a prison, but as a classroom. A system where consciousness enters form, learns through experience, and then returns with deeper understanding. Life after life, the same awareness wears different faces, different strengths, different wounds, different lessons, but the same observer behind the eyes. From this perspective, suffering is not meaningless, but neither is it glorified. It becomes information, feedback, a signal pointing toward unfinished understanding. This is where the concept of cause and consequence enters, not as moral judgment, but as balance. Every choice alters perception. Every action leaves an imprint, not because the universe is keeping score, but because consciousness remembers what it has yet to integrate. If you touch fire and feel pain, you don't call it punishment. You call it learning. In the same way, certain experiences repeat, not because you failed, but because awareness has not yet fully absorbed their lesson. Patterns continue until they are understood, not intellectually, experientially. This is why people often find themselves facing the same emotional conflicts in different forms, different relationships, different environments, same internal tension. The setting changes, the lesson remains, and yet, this is critical, nothing is forced. Free will is not an illusion in this framework. It is the engine. The soul does not enter life with a fixed script. It enters with tendencies, themes, probabilities. The rest is choice. How you respond matters more than what happens. Two people can experience the same pain. One becomes bitter. The other becomes compassionate. Same event, different evolution. This is why life feels personal, because it is. The universe doesn't shape you. You shape yourself through how you move through it. But there is another layer most people never consider. Before this life began, consciousness did not drop blindly into existence. It prepared, not in the way the human mind plans, but in intention. It reviewed what had been learned, what had been avoided, what still created resistance, and then it selected conditions that would make avoidance impossible. A body that feels too sensitive, a family that triggers old patterns, a mind that questions everything, not because you are cursed, but because these conditions are efficient teachers. From the outside, it looks cruel. From the inside, it is precise. This also explains something deeply unsettling, yet strangely comforting. Why certain people feel instantly familiar, why some relationships feel inevitable, why certain encounters change the trajectory of your life with no logical explanation. These are not random collisions. They are intersections of unfinished understanding. Souls crossing paths again, not to punish, but to resolve. Sometimes through love, sometimes through conflict, sometimes through loss. Because awareness grows fastest when it is emotionally engaged. And yet, upon entering the physical world, something essential happens. Memory dissolves. The awareness forgets what it is. This forgetting is not a flaw in the system, it is the system. If you remembered everything, past lives, intentions, outcomes, there would be no authenticity in your choices. You wouldn't choose courage if you already knew the ending. You wouldn't choose kindness if you knew exactly how it paid off. The veil creates meaning. It forces discovery instead of obedience. Still, fragments leak through intuition, déjà vu, a sense of being older than your age, a pull toward questions that others dismiss. These are not proof, but they are signals, hints that something deeper is unfolding beneath the surface of ordinary life. This is also why the physical world matters so much. It is dense, slow, resistant, and that resistance creates clarity. In a realm without friction, intention is effortless. Here, intention is tested. Fear becomes real. Loss becomes real. Choice becomes heavy. And through that weight, awareness sharpens. Compassion is forged through pain, wisdom through consequence, presence through impermanence. But this world also contains traps, attachment, identity, the illusion that you are only your thoughts, your roles, your achievements. Many lifetimes can pass without questioning this, and that's not failure, it's pacing. Every consciousness unfolds at its own speed. Eventually, though, something cracks, a loss that cannot be rationalized, a question that refuses to go away, a sense that success did not deliver what it promised. This is not collapse, it is awakening pressure, the beginning of remembering, not memory of past lives, but recognition of depth, a quiet realization that you are not here to consume experience, but to understand it. And this is where the journey truly begins, not when everything makes sense, but when you realize it never was supposed to. Death is not the end of the journey. It only feels that way because the human mind is built to measure existence in beginnings and endings. Birth, childhood, aging, death, a straight line. But consciousness does not move in straight lines. When the body stops, awareness does not vanish. It withdraws, not suddenly, not violently, gently, like waking from a vivid dream. At first, there is confusion, not fear, but disorientation. The identity that once felt solid begins to loosen. The name, the roles, the memories tied to the body start to feel distant, like clothes that no longer fit. And then something profound happens. Perspective returns. The soul begins to see its life, not through self-judgment, not through praise or blame, but through understanding. Moments unfold again. Choices, words spoken, silences held, love given, love withheld. But this time, the soul does not observe only from its own point of view. It feels everything it caused, the weight of harsh words, the warmth of kindness, the ripples of small decisions that once seemed insignificant. This is not punishment. No external judge sits in condemnation. The only mirror is awareness itself. And awareness cannot lie. This life review is not meant to shame. It is meant to teach empathy at the deepest possible level, to understand not just what you did, but how it felt to be on the other side of it. For many souls, this realization alone reshapes future intention. more powerfully than any rule or commandment ever could. After this integration, consciousness enters a period of rest. Earth life is dense, emotionally intense, physically limiting. The soul needs space to recalibrate. In this state, there is no hunger, no time pressure, no survival instinct. Awareness expands again, reconnecting with a broader field of intelligence. Some describe it as returning home, others as entering a learning realm, but it is not a static heaven. It is dynamic, reflective, alive with understanding. Souls naturally gravitate toward others with similar levels of awareness. Groups bonded not by identity, but by resonance. These are not hierarchies, but communities of shared growth. This is where something unexpected occurs. The soul does not immediately rush back into another life. It pauses. It evaluates. What was learned? What was avoided? Where did fear override wisdom? Where did compassion emerge naturally? This is where the illusion of randomness fully collapses, because the next incarnation is not assigned, it is chosen, with guidance, yes, but ultimately by the soul itself. Why would consciousness willingly return to limitation? Because growth still calls, because certain understandings cannot be completed without embodiment, because insight without experience is incomplete. And so the soul begins to design the conditions most likely to catalyze its next evolution. Not comfort, not pleasure, efficiency. This is why some lives are harder than others. A soul seeking patience may choose delay. A soul seeking humility may choose power and the temptation to abuse it. A soul seeking compassion may choose vulnerability. These are not rewards or punishments. They are targeted lessons. And here is where one of the most misunderstood aspects emerges. Relationships. Souls do not incarnate alone. They coordinate. Groups of awareness travel together across lifetimes, exchanging roles. A parent in one life becomes a child in another. A lover becomes a rival. Betrayer becomes a teacher. Not out of cruelty, but out of mutual agreement to accelerate growth. These are not eternal contracts. Free will always remains, but unresolved dynamics tend to magnetize repetition. Until the lesson is integrated, the pattern finds a new stage. This is why some relationships feel inevitable, why certain people trigger you beyond logic, why forgiveness feels harder and more necessary than expected. They are mirrors, not enemies. And once the soul finalizes its intention, something crucial must happen. Forgetting. The awareness willingly releases memory of planning, past lives, and broader truth, because remembered truth would distort the lesson. Imagine trying to learn courage while knowing you cannot fail. The veil makes choice real. The soul enters the body not as a god, but as a question. From infancy, awareness is narrow, focused on survival. Gradually, identity forms, language, culture, belief. The deeper knowledge does not disappear. It recedes. It becomes intuition, a sense of rightness, a quiet discomfort with shallow explanations. For some, this inner knowing stays dormant for many lifetimes. For others, it stirs early. They feel out of place, overly sensitive, too aware. These are not flaws. They are signs of accumulated insight pressing against the limits of form. But the interlife period is not only preparation. Some souls choose not to return immediately. They remain in subtler realms, assisting others, not as saviors, but as guides, sending impressions, dreams, sudden clarity. They do not interfere with free will, but they nudge awareness toward alignment. Others delay reincarnation due to attachment, unfinished emotional ties, fear of repeating pain. These souls linger closer to the physical world, learning gradually until readiness returns. There is no rush. Time does not pressure consciousness, only intention moves it. And yet, despite all this planning, one, truth remains constant. Nothing unfolds exactly as expected. Free will inside incarnation changes trajectories. A soul may soften lessons through awareness or intensify them through resistance. The plan is flexible, not fate, but framework. And this is where human responsibility re-enters the picture. You are not living out a sentence, you are participating in a curriculum. Every choice matters because it informs what comes next, not just in this life, but beyond it. And slowly, through repeated cycles, something changes. The soul no longer seeks experience for its own sake. It seeks understanding. Compassion stabilizes. Fear loosens its grip. The need to control dissolves. And with that shift, the pull toward incarnation weakens, not because life is rejected, but because its lessons are nearing completion. But what does completion look like? What happens when the cycle finally breaks? Eventually, something subtle but irreversible shifts. The soul stops asking, "What can I experience next?" and begins asking, "What no longer controls me?" This is the turning point. Not dramatic, not announced, just a quiet loss of hunger. Desire doesn't vanish, but it loosens. Fear still appears, but it no longer commands. Pain still arises, but it no longer defines identity. This is how the cycle begins to unwind. Liberation is often imagined as escape, leaving the world, transcending the body, dissolving into light. But ancient traditions were far more precise. Freedom is not leaving life. Freedom is no longer being owned by it. At the beginning of the journey, consciousness is fused to sensation. Pleasure pulls, pain pushes, identity forms around reaction. The self is built from attachment. But over lifetimes, something matures. The soul begins to witness its own impulses instead of obeying them. Anger is felt, but not followed. Desire is noticed, but not chased. Fear is acknowledged, but not believed. This is not suppression. It is clarity. And clarity dissolves karma faster than suffering ever could. Because karma is not a ledger of actions, it is momentum of unconsciousness. When reaction ends, repetition ends. This is why some people seem to live lightly even in difficulty. Why certain individuals move through chaos without becoming it. Why others can love without needing possession. They are not superior. They are less entangled. As this detachment stabilizes, incarnation changes quality. Life is still lived, but with awareness as the center, not the ego. The soul begins to act from understanding rather than compulsion. And here, something extraordinary happens. Reincarnation is no longer mandatory. The gravitational pull of unfinished lessons weakens. The cycle does not break through force, but through completion. This is what different traditions pointed to using different language. Liberation, nirvana, moksha, awakening, not annihilation, integration. At this stage, consciousness fully remembers itself, not intellectually, but experientially. The illusion of separation dissolves. The soul recognizes itself in others, not as philosophy, but as perception. Compassion becomes natural, not moral. Service becomes effortless, not sacrificial. And here lies the paradox. When reincarnation is no longer required, it becomes a choice. Some souls withdraw entirely from physical cycles, moving into subtler dimensions of existence where form is no longer necessary for learning. Others return, not to learn, but to assist. These are the beings remembered throughout history, not because they demanded worship, but because their presence disrupted unconsciousness. They taught without force. They lived without fear. They revealed truth not through doctrine, but through example. Their message was always the same: beneath different symbols. You are not broken. You are not condemned. You are not here by accident. You are consciousness learning itself. And the journey does not require perfection, only honesty. Most people misunderstand awakening as becoming something extraordinary. In reality, it is becoming unburdened. Unburdened by compulsive identity. Unburdened by inherited fear. Unburdened by the belief that meaning must be earned through suffering. This does not make life easier, it makes it clearer. Challenges still arise, but they are met without resistance. Loss still happens, but it does not hollow the soul. Death still comes, but it is recognized as transition, not erasure. And here is the most important truth, one rarely spoken. You do not need to wait for another life to move closer to liberation. The cycle does not end after life. It loosens within it. Every moment of awareness weakens unconscious momentum. Every time you respond instead of react, the loop softens. Every time you choose understanding over defense, the wheel slows. This is why the present moment matters more than belief. Why attention matters more than doctrine. Why how you live matters more than what you claim to know. The soul does not ascend through ideas. It ascends through embodiment, through living truth when it is inconvenient, through choosing clarity when fear would be easier, through compassion when ego wants separation. And this is where the ancient teachings quietly point back to you, not as a follower, not as a seeker waiting for permission, but as a participant in your own awakening. You are not here to escape life. You are here to see through it, to recognize what you are beneath roles, memories, and stories, to realize that the observer you've always felt behind your thoughts was never temporary. It has been here before. It will be here again, until one day it no longer needs to return, and when that day comes, it won't feel like an ending. It will feel like recognition, like remembering something you always knew, but finally lived. If this journey stirred something in you, I want to hear it. Comment below. Do you feel like this life is teaching you something specific? Or do you feel like you've been here before? Your reflection might be the key someone else needs to hear.